This is Tim Phillips, CEO of Phillips and Company Advisors. I want to welcome you to the Phillips and Company Poor Man Podcast. We really can't afford to officially do these things like everybody else does, but we wanted you to hear from what we think is one of the leading experts in American politics, Greg Strimple, CEO of GS Strategy Group. Greg, thanks for just taking a few minutes with us to talk about where you think this tax policy is going to lie. And to tee it up, I've asked you about all the policy stuff, and you've kind of said, Tim, I don't know that it's so much policy versus politics. Talk about what you mean by that.
Well, I think that there's lots of things that are going to rapidly change in Washington, D.C. Number one is the Democrats have been projecting this front of unity that is rapidly disappearing by the hour. And what I mean by that is last weekend's face-off between Bernie Sanders and Joe Manchin over the size of their $3.5 trillion package is going to be the first fault line in this debate. So Bernie's saying he's compromised to go from $6 trillion to $3.5 trillion. Joe Manchin says that he won't do anything over $1.5 trillion and really prefer $1 trillion. And while it looks like it's just Joe Manchin versus everyone, I think there's several senators that Manchin has behind him. Kristen Sinema from Arizona, for example, and John Tester from Montana. So I think that the situation is going to devolve rapidly because we're going from a position of here's how we all agree to here's how we disagree.
So Greg, it sounds like when you listen to the pundits, they're kind of using this, hey, Joe Manchin, you have this incredible $1.5 trillion infrastructure package that will blow up unless you flex and give us $3.5 trillion of human infrastructure. Maybe it's only $1 trillion of infrastructure. Does that carry weight with him? Is that going to move him off his number?
Well, I was talking to a Republican chief of staff in the Senate last week, and she was very much of the opinion that she's not sure that the 10 Republican votes for the infrastructure package are still there based on what happened in Afghanistan, the weakening of Joe Biden's position with the electorate, and now the Democratic push on $3.5 trillion.
So some think like one of the common refrains you hear is, hey, there's no way the Democrats are going to lose this reconciliation opportunity and not get something done when they can coming into 2022 midterms. How flexible do you think the liberal or progressive wing of the Democratic Party is going to be? Or does this just evolve into a chaotic food fight?
Well, I think that the food fight is 100% the likely outcome of what's going to occur. I right now look at this and say Pelosi and Schumer say this is going to be all figured out in 2 weeks. No way. There's giant gulfs among the House and the Senate Democratic caucuses on how they're going to pay for it. There's really contentious issues out there in terms of SALT tax relief versus estate tax and the family farm type issues there. So that's going to be a big issue. And I think to your point, Tim, which is a really good one, as this evolves, we're going to move from being a how are we going to pay for it fight into if there's only $1 trillion or $1.5 trillion, which priority gets funded, and the Democratic, kind of special interest groups are going to go with the long knives and start cutting each other up.
So I was talking to a pharmaceutical analyst last week, and it was clear that H.R. 3, which is Pelosi's bill to have Medicare negotiate drugs prices, was too draconian, and Menendez, New Jersey senator, his proposal was more moderate in terms of drug price reduction. I mean, because mostly major pharmaceuticals are located in blue states, or something like 2 million jobs associated with the pharmaceutical industry, does that matter in the scope of negotiating this package, which includes, Medicare as the largest buyer of drugs, kind of cramming down the pharmaceutical industry? How do you think about that?
Well, I think that New Jersey, where Menendez is from, is a giant pharmaceutical state, and so I think that that's real. The concerns about the economy, about healthcare, about employment, about drug pricing, all that stuff. I think that one of the easy layups for the Democrats is to go and do Medicare prescription drug negotiation. I think that that's a no-brainer for them, and it creates a lot of money. The issue with that money, though, right now it's being earmarked to go towards Medicare expansion and to having dental and vision benefits. And I think that that's an easy $500 billion, $750 billion, and you actually have Republican and Democrat support on that. The problem is, if in the Democratic food fight, where they're like, is it going to be climate change that they address? Is there going to be health care that they address? They also have to shore up Obamacare and the finance mechanism for Obamacare, and that's seen as a legacy item for Nancy Pelosi. When you look at all those various pots that need money, it may be that the pharmaceutical piece gets blown up because they can't agree what it's going to be used to fund.
And Greg, just final question. You're one of the leading pollsters. I mean, you've surveyed for Fortune 100 companies. You've surveyed for National Republican. I mean, you've surveyed for a lot of folks in your long career. What do the public opinion polls say? I mean, you saw on CNN last night Dana Bash saying, well, the surveys all say, Joe Manchin, you should buckle because you're facing this onslaught of popularity for this $3.5 trillion. Is that really what the surveys say, or what are the surveys saying?
The Democrats do a very good job of saying, hey, if you want to have your cake and eat it too, will you support it? And everyone in America says sure. But that's not the way it works. And when you actually present American voters with a choice, they change. The bigger challenge for Democrats right now electorally is that right now that Biden's seen by almost 2-1 negatively among independents. And that swing audience who hated Donald Trump, who threw the Republicans out of Congress in 2018, were never that bad towards Trump. And so this appears to me to be the beginnings of an epic electoral wipeout in 2022. And I think that this debate on the budget, on the taxes that pay for it, on all the spending programs is going to be a catalyst that triggers, potential electoral landslides across the board.
My friend Greg Strimple, thank you for the Poor Man podcast time. I hope that our audience really enjoys some of this thoughtful insight. And maybe we'll try to do this Phillips and Company Poor Man podcast again. Greg, we'll send you your check, which is basically nothing, because, again, it wouldn't be Poor Man podcast if we actually paid you anything.
Well, I think you know some folks who can help out.
Yeah, you got it. Thanks, Greg.
Thanks, Jim.